It's time to open up the mailbag for Season 4. These questions are gathered over at kylefergusson.com using the contact link, or by joining the Discord found on that website as well. The first question comes from Shannon, who says, I just finished episode 47 of There Will Be Dungeons, the Frog Pants Network show, and during it, John rolls 2 natural 20s in a row. The DM mentions that he has the ability to ask him to change dice. Is this really something a DM can do? Or is it just because it's an online session? During my recent campaign, I had one player roll natural 20s during all boss fights. It'd be 2 natural 20s in a row sometimes, even 3. They'd do the roll on the table for everyone to see. I felt like I handled it really well by adjusting as the fight progressed so it would last longer. Is this a good way to go about that? Is there anything else you might suggest? I feel like asking them to change dice is really extreme because she's having fun, but at the same time, my boss fights become not so boss-filled, even if I buff them. So I'll dive into answering your direct questions first, and then we'll get to the advice. Yes, you can ask your players to change dice. It's not exactly a fun thing. You should probably just laugh it off and continue to enjoy yourself. Dice rolls are a bit more scrutinized in online play because the dice can't be seen, so there's a bit of a trust exchange going on. And you did the right thing by adjusting the fight as you went to make sure that it was still a story climax for your players. Ideally, that isn't just inflating health pool numbers to make the fight last longer. You actually gave that critical hit some impact on the battle in a tactical way. Let's say the boss is trying to complete a ritual. That crit allowed them to interrupt it in full and may have also had unforeseen circumstances, such as rifts opening and chaos pouring out. If you have a phase boss, well, you let the critical hit happen and move to the next phase. They decapitated the boss, but the spirit, the demon possessing that person, comes out in full, and now the boss fight is really on. You just kind of skipped phase 1. And going off our previous episode, you might have it evolve into a chase scene as the boss tries to make their big escape, seeing that the players are lucky, but also quite powerful. But there is a way to check the dice themselves. It's understandable that seeing that many natural 20s raises some suspicion, and certainly some frustration as a DM. And you can perform this test right in your own home. What you're going to need is a cup of water, a measured cup, and 3 tablespoons of salt. What you're going to do is take that cup of water, put it in a glass, and add the 3 tablespoons of salt to it. This is so the water is more dense, and things will float inside. It's an old golfing trick to check if balls are well balanced. And you're going to do that with dice. Now with your salty water, you drop your dice in. And if they seem to be a little heavy on the bottom, one number will come up more often than others, and that may be a natural 20. As you push it around and spin it in the water, it should show numbers freely, rather than favoring one side. And it's not always natural 20s that the dice favor. Sometimes they end up on weird half numbers, or even a 1. That'd be a bad set of dice. This is a little more common than it used to be since D&D has really had an explosion in popularity. There's a lot of cheap dice out there. Some of them have very chalky interiors that can settle on one side, or just mean that it's completely unbalanced after creation. It does seem like these sort of swirl pattern dice are a little more vulnerable in this way, made with cheap plastics that aren't exactly balanced. Your best bet for some fair dice are going to be clear dice that you can see all the way through. This way you know the entire thing is made of one type of plastic. And of course, this is a dramatic and fun little bit of alchemy you can perform at your table. Players will all gather around, nervous that their dice are the broken ones. If they end up having a bad set of dice, point them towards some see-through dice that you know are a bit more balanced. You could also look into crystal dice for your table. These are long, rolling dice that get a bit more momentum and roll for longer, meaning they have more randomization and are less likely to be dropped on a certain number by a player. The biggest problem with these, and I speak from experience, they take a long time to stop rolling, particularly the D20 with all of its sides. And this can really elongate the time between getting an answer to a roll. So I definitely suggest going with those clear dice instead. Ryan asks, I have a character 20 plus years in the making, in my head, that I really want to explore. A Bladesinger from the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons supplement books. It's now fairly easy to do via Eldritch Knight path. Looking for your thoughts on mechanics. Do I multi into Wizard to supplement the arcane aspect? Multi into Monk with a similar elements path? Or do I keep it with a single class? I already have a backstory for him. He is top of his class for a Bladesinger, but he was cast out from the profession and family because he sees things that aren't there, going with the Haunted One thread. Had an experience with a dragon that may or may not have happened. But most of the time, the party thinks he's crazy and gives him a wide berth. Well, I'm happy to tell you, Ryan, that the Bladesinger is in 5th edition. You can find it in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and it's available also at D&D Beyond. It is a wizard arcane tradition, so you'd select it at level 2 under the title of Blade Singing. This unlocks Blade Song, which is a lot like a Rage where you get bonus AC, increased speed, advantage on acrobatics checks, and you have that old specialization in a one-handed melee weapon, though this has expanded away from the longsword or rapier of the past into just about every one-handed weapon that you can think to wield. You might still think about the Eldritch Knight because they're a little more durable in the early levels. A 5th edition Bladesinger is still a wizard at low levels, and you'll probably be spending most of your time in the backline casting spells. As a wizard, you'll have access to a lot of spells, and you can favor in your early picks, shield, and absorb elements if you really want to get into the melee. But by level 6, you'll have your extra attack, by level 10, you'll have Song of Defense, and you'll basically be able to do your fantasy. Now, with 20 years in the making, I am cautious to caution you about your choice of backstory. I've seen a lot of characters that are crazy or see things. You need to make sure that your table has room for a character like that. What often happens is players show up to their first session and multiple people want to be the crazy one. They might have amnesia, have a friend only they can see, hear voices, be possessed in a light way. And suddenly the table devolves into a contest to see who is the most crazy, who's going to assert their dominance over the crazy role, and eventually the other characters have to give way to the most crazy character so that the story can actually commence. So I'd keep the core elements of your backstory here. Cast out from profession and family, tells of an experience that may or may not have happened, but ultimately embrace the openings that are available at your table. You could twist this into a con man, a disturbed cop who is needed back on the force, a fallen Jedi. My point being, you may have to be more functional than you intend. Look at Cyclops from X-Men. Poor guy has a lot going on. He still has to play Big Brother at the end of the day. D&D Guru writes in and says, I'm running a campaign, but my mom rarely lets me play. She doesn't know that much about D&D, so she doesn't get the effects of a long break in a campaign. When we get to play, a good portion of our time is spent refreshing them on the events of last session. How do you suggest I tell her that I need to play more often without sounding rude? This question hits home for me. In middle school, I was not allowed to play D&D, and I thought it was because my mom was buying into the tabloids of it, the dangers, the devil worship that could come from playing D&D. What actually was happening was I was presenting my mom with conflicting ideas. I wanted to be popular. I wanted to look good, be athletic. I wanted to have a girlfriend. And in her mind, playing D&D was not going to make me succeed at those goals I had already presented to her. So she basically went about protecting me from myself. And so naturally I started playing D&D secretly, at other people's houses. But eventually I sat down with my mom and asked her why wasn't I allowed to play D&D, and I got that answer. That it didn't match the goals she was already trying to help me with. And this could be your situation. Your mom may not understand the importance of D&D to you and your friends, or she may have been presented with conflicting goals and information along the way, and she's trying to protect you from yourself. After that conversation with my mother, I joined a D&D group playing every Sunday. I even found a girlfriend at that table. That's a whole nother thing, dating people at the D&D table. Maybe we should save that for another episode, but I would suggest sitting down with your mom and asking her why she's limiting your playtime. You may need to be prepared for an exchange to happen. You may not be studying hard enough in her eyes. The house needs cleaning before people come over. Or it's just kind of awkward for her, and it'd be better if played at someone else's house. And that's kind of how my situation went. I embraced my nerddom, but my mom didn't really understand it. She didn't want to hear about my necromancer and the bosses we beat that day. She just let it happen. But she understood how important it was to me now. But in the end, it could just be that she doesn't understand that the game is played that often. And much like a TV show that comes out weekly, it's about keeping the audience involved. After all, you're hanging out with friends, you might even play it outside. Just be prepared for that social exchange. She may need something in return in order to warrant you that time with your friends. Ken asks, with some recent life changes, I unfortunately don't have time to continue running my current campaign for over 2 years. One of my players has volunteered to take over the group as DM, and the party will continue on without me. I can't shake the feeling that I didn't end the campaign as well as I should have. Do you have any advice on how to step down from being DM, and/or how to end a campaign well? I would definitely encourage you to end it. It is very cool that one of your players is willing to step up as DM. Let them have their own campaign. Don't continue the story. Finish your story. There is nothing wrong with a sudden acceleration. Let's say you set up your players to collect the 7 gems of lore. Well, the bad guy now has 4 of them. It's go time. It's time to end this thing, today. And your players head towards the final confrontation. There they fight 3 mini-bosses at a time that were meant to be their own bosses, and the final boss awaits in the tower. Ending a campaign is not only about completing the objective, but tying up everything at the end, giving the players a place to settle. And while the movie doesn't end when you think it should about 20 times in a row, Lord of the Rings: Return to the King is your best example. Go through each player, maybe groups of players if you can group them, and give them an ending. Sit down with them. You're looking at a 7 to 12 hour session here, but it's the climax after all. Everybody come on over, bring your food. We're going to be camped out for the entire evening till 2 a.m. and we're going to get this story done today. That's a very thrilling thing for players. And because it's the thrilling climax, players tend to make room for it. People are down to open up their schedule. They know this is the end and they want to attend. There's no more arguments about I can make this Sunday but not future Sundays. But you're still going to have that itch to create, to DM. Talk to that player, now becoming the DM, and see if you can be a reoccurring character. One that is available when you're available. You get to play, but you have a greater impact during your short time than you normally would. Don't leave yourself completely without that outlet, if you can afford the time. Ricky asks, as a new DM, I feel my players are really enjoying themselves, and for the most part, everything is running smoothly. My biggest issue, I think, however, is organization. Is there an optimal way to set up a notebook or notebooks? I currently have a tabbed binder and have been tinkering with OneNote for a solution, and I'm curious if there's any way to organize a campaign's information that you've found most efficient. I've heard a lot of great things about OneNote, and I know a lot of people who use Google Docs. To me, those programs are more about your time at a computer. If you work a job where you have a lot of downtime at a computer, those programs are fabulous for quick additions and closing them as the boss walks by. If you have a job where you're on your feet working your hands all day, you may enjoy sitting at a computer, adding words to a doc. For me, I'm in front of computers a lot. I need a break, and I want to have all my books spread out and a big notebook with my pen or pencil and having at it. So my view is definitely going to be skewed based on that preference. So for me, planning a campaign is about purchasing a big notebook. And I used to go to such lengths as to only purchase them at Renaissance fairs. You know, those big tomes, leather bound with like a owl imprinted on the front, a little class lock. Yeah. As time has gone on, I've missed my yearly trip to the Renaissance fair, so I've settled for more of a moleskin Walmart purchase. But that notebook is that campaign. And it's about constant iteration to stay on top of everything. Your first couple pages are just going to be lists of monsters you think are cool, themes, ideas, things that interest you. Then those next couple of pages are notes you've made about the players as they start to pick out their classes. Pages after that become a mix of those two ideas. How can I get a warlock interested and involved in a story about a corrupt paladin order? And then the real planning and mapping starts. What are the major beats in your story? List them out as you see them today. After the first play session, reread those beats. Have they changed? Redo them. List them out again, but with those adaptations for what the players did in the previous session. And every time you play, you go back through your notes and you see if that web, that story, is still progressing along the dots you laid out. If it's not, you change the story, and you only have to go back a couple pages to find the new version of the full campaign layout. Always updating, adjusting based on the player's choices, but with the end goal in mind. That way you're not getting stuck in the trap of whatever you find cool this week. Your players need to make it to the dilapidated castle. Well, what if there was a rickety rope bridge and harpies attacked? That's a whole play session there. Stay focused on your primary goal. Keep telling your story and hitting those major beats so your story is efficient, but always reviewing them, redoing them after each session to make sure things stay targeted. That method is likely very particular to the way that I enjoy DMing. I am often at my most giddy when a session just ended and everybody leaves my house. And I get to sit back down with all my books and review and plan for the next session, see where things went, and see how those threads of fate have changed. I also really like this method because it creates a souvenir. As you complete that notebook, you write Lords of Shade Part 1 on a piece of tape, put it on the edge, and then put it in the bookshelf. You can always review it later. That next notebook would start in a similar fashion, listing the major beats and choices the players have made to get to this point, and what my main beats are going to be into the future. Keeping that story and our play sessions gameplay very focused. And thank you all for your questions today. There was lots of questions we didn't get to. Some will make it on the future Mailbag episode of this season. Some may become their own episodes, because they're such great questions. And you can send those over again at kylefergusson.com, 2 S's in Fergusson. You can also join the Discord there and leave questions in the DM Gives Inspiration tab. The show is supported by the patrons over at patreon.com/kylefergusson. Music was by Brian Griffith. Next week, we're going to tackle a topic that we originally addressed back in Season 1, Episode 9, Playing Digitally. We're going to go a bit deeper into that topic, given current circumstances and how a lot of our games are going to be moving online for the time being. I know that the information and stories I share on this show heavily favor meeting in person to play Dungeons & Dragons because that's the way I love to DM. For the timelessness of this episode, I did answer the questions in that preferred way, but we all need to do our part. And my part to play will be teaching advanced digital tabletoppery next episode. I look forward to sharing that information with you all. Be safe out there. I'll see you next time.